This is Remarks.
Hi, I'm Phoebe.
And I am Taylor.
Here we are. I do want to say a slight apology to Paris Hilton from the last episode. I feel like I was harsh on her about the whole sex tape thing. Because I just watched that Paris Hilton documentary thing. Man, sorry, Paris. Also, it was not her choice to have that sex tape come out. It was definitely leaked. And she was, probably low-key kind of groomed by the guy that she was with in the tape. So, Paris, yeah. I'm sorry. I was a little harsh on you. I shouldn't have been as harsh.
That's respectable. As long as you can own up to being a little harsh on Paris Hilton.
That's all we ask.
I didn't feel like you said anything too negative about her having a sex tape.
No.
Other than just she had one, and that's kind of why she was famous.
Yes. And then there was something where it was rumored that she had said to Kim Kardashian a really good easy way to get famous is to have a sex tape, which might be true, but also yeah, she's been through it a little bit. I mean, I feel marginally bad for her because she still is rich and was set up from day one of her life, but she's also been through some shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there you go.
It's true. Phoebe and I were just talking about how legally no one can tell us how long this podcast could be, so we could make this 17 hours long.
So buckle in for this episode. If you pause it at all even once, we will know, and we will press charges.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And this is, if my calculations are correct, this is the only podcast that exists, so I don't know what else you would listen to.
I mean, I think we might even be the only form of media or entertainment ever created ever. This is the first time anybody's ever done any type of creative media.
We invented comedy, and it happened right here.
Yeah, right now is when comedy happens.
Exactly.
So you're welcome.
This is historical.
We are hilarious. If you feel something happening in your diaphragm area and then a weird sound comes out of your mouth, that's called laughter. And we have given that gift to you, and you're welcome.
And you're welcome. Anyway, but yeah, so we're starting a new series called Art of Revolution.
Art of the Revolution.
Yeah. And where we go through, and we're going to just be talking about some revolutionary art movements. So pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Stoked for this shit.
Getting into it. Today we're talking about the French Revolution of 1848. One of the 17 revolutions that happened in France.
France loves revolutions.
And I understand. It's a vibe for sure.
Yeah, I would love if we could, I don't know, latch onto that a little bit. That would be cool.
Yeah, do some of that shit.
Mm-hmm. Because it's literally just any time that they were not feeling what the government was doing, they were revolution.
Let's get a revolution going. Yeah, exactly.
So props to that.
Well, a little bit of history on the revolution to begin with here. Let me flip over here. The revolutions of 1848, and I say revolutions purposefully because there was actually quite a few revolutions that went on. It was not just France, although it began in France. It was called the Springtime of the People because it kind of started from February and went to July mostly. Mm-hmm. It began in France, but over 50 countries actually joined in with kind of the revolutionary vibes that were going on in Europe, They, some of the biggest demands of the time were more participation in government and democracy, freedom of the press, and, just generally more representation so that they could not be oppressed. There was some crop failures that were happening in 1846, which created hardship for the lower class, which kind of happened again all over that region of Europe. And then there was a technology boom that also happened that made it hard to find work along with, population growth.
Right.
Because whenever there's technological booms, people are out of jobs for a certain amount of time until they are reintegrated somewhere else.
And this was moving towards the Industrial Revolution.
Yes, I believe so. It was, kind of getting up to that point where everything kind of boomed, but still having a lot of industrial progress.
Right,
That's
right.
the right word.
Right, well, and it's like as they are able to develop, like, new machinery to do these work that, like, the peasant of the day was doing, like, that's less jobs for those people.
Exactly, and especially, you know, because it's something that we see even, like, now in our cultures, like, whenever they develop something new, it puts however many people out of a job, and then these people, you know, it's like no one's training them to go back into a different field.
Right,
know?
exactly.
It's like, imagine your entire life you've been doing something, you went to school to do this thing.
Yeah.
Like computers, for instance, and then, like, they develop something new that, like, takes its place, and you're
Yeah.
like, well, fuck. Like,
What do I do now?
should I go back to school and give them more money?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, and especially in this time, it's like, how many options are you gonna, like, farming,
Factory, maybe.
couple other things. So
Yeah.
it's like, if you do farming, that's what you've done because your family's done that for centuries, and then you're taught to be a farmer from a little child, and then you don't know how to do shit else.
Absolutely. Well, and also too, like, geographically speaking, like, you know, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, it's like, what else is there to do than
Right.
farm?
True, yeah.
And then, like, if you're in a city, you can't go and farm. Like, there's
Exactly.
not many farms around.
Exactly.
So, it's interesting. But yeah, so the bad crop caused the food prices to soar, which of course led to this kind of unrest, people starving, people not getting their needs covered. One of the I read here, one of the, like, things in France that they were shooting for, it just made me laugh more than anything, but because they were trying to get more democracy in place and representation, so they were really pushing for universal male suffrage, not just suffrage in general, but
Yes,
'cause
yeah.
even the revolutionaries were pretty sexist.
You can only get so much at a time. Like,
Baby steps.
Maybe there was a people's revolution for workers, but, you know, women still,
You're like, well, the women aren't workers, so they really need rights. Like, no, it's just, I think it's funny. Like,
I saw that too, yeah, male suffrage. I was like, huh.
yeah, you don't really think, because I feel like we talk mostly about, like, the women's suffrage
Yeah,
movement. But
yeah.
It's just, I don't know, funny. But yeah, so that revolution in France specifically led to the French Second Republic. What had happened here... So it started off at, like, the beginning of the 1800s. King Louis the 18th, I believe is how that Roman numeral is said.
I was seeing some of that, and I was like, oh fuck, I do not know how to read these.
Ruled under monarchy. He died and was replaced by Charles X, which Charles X implemented these 4 ordinances of Saint Cloud, which lowered the electorate, abolished free press, and dissolved the lower class, or the lower house, I should say. And so he was pretty shitty, doing a lot of, like, you know, I'm gonna keep all the power kind of shit. And again, that was kind of at the beginning of the 1800s, and he was actually replaced by Louis Philippe, which didn't have any numbers after his name, which was nice.
First of his kind.
Exactly. He did free the press, but he only allowed the landlords to vote, which is classic, like, land ownership.
Yep.
Land ownership classism. I believe that Charles X, too, I should say, I believe he was, like, run out of the city or, like, forced to leave by one of the previous revolutions that took place in the 1800s. I didn't have too much info on that I was able to look into, but yeah, so, you know, landlords. How do you feel about landlords, Phoebe?
Oh, let me tell you, they're my favorite kind of people.
Never met a landlord I didn't like.
Yeah, it's just, like, an unfortunate way that, because, okay, tangent about landlords for a second.
That's what we're here for. We're 9 minutes in, so
great, good.
it's time for tangents.
Can only hold it in for so long. So, like, I had seen I don't know, last summer, all the Instagram infographics going around, and there was basically something that was saying, like, nobody should be a landlord, realistically. And, like, yeah, that would be super great. However, like, I feel like these days, there's just no getting around it. Like, except for complete revolution.
Yeah.
Because, like, nobody can fucking afford property. Like, we can't afford to purchase property right now unless the cost of property goes down significantly. And so, like, kind of our only choice right now is to have landlords. So
It's true. And I mean, the idea of, like, private property will always end with somebody, like, having the land and giving it, you know, like, renting it to someone else or whatever for whatever the reason is. But
right.
So.
But yeah, that being said, though, if you are a landlord, don't be a fucking piece of shit about it.
Yeah. Should consider not being a landlord.
Yeah, that too. Consider selling your property for a low price that's affordable. I don't know.
That's all we're gonna say. Do not. I can't tell you to commit crimes against landlords.
Right. But
they're, you know,
we can't say that we wouldn't be happy if you did.
Like, yeah.
Right?
Also, you know, it's real easy to make Molotov cocktails. Just look it up. For information, not
no,
to make
exactly. To know, so you don't accidentally make wine.
Exactly. In case you don't want to, like, be just drinking casually and, like, I made a Molotov cocktail.
I stuffed a napkin in there and accidentally lit it on fire and then threw it at a police station. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, to get back on track here, so King Louis Philip was a pretty pro-banker, even, like, because he didn't like take any of the, or he still wasn't, like, a good ruler, I would say. You know, I don't think that any king is good, but he didn't like suppress the press again. So he did have free press, but again, only landlords were allowed to vote. He was very pro-banker, which means that by 1848, like, only 1% of the population held the franchise, as in, like, the money. Kind of the situation, a lot of the situation we have now. Like,
yeah.
The majority of the wealth was held by a very few people, mostly in the banking industry under King Louis Philip. There was, during the Revolution and kind of leading up to it here, there was the Campagne des Banquets, which was the campaign of banquets. And it was intended to circumvent the outlaw and political gatherings. So you couldn't gather politically. Again, I think it's funny because there's so much, there have been so many revolutions in France. Like, they're very, like, at least at that time, they were very, like, tiptoe around, like, you know, they were kind of tiptoeing, but they were also, like, you can't gather politically. You know, we, like, want to try to make them think that we're on their side without, like...
Right.
Like, oh, why would you need to gather politically if you can, you know, we're here for you. Like,
right.
We're the people's government, even though it was always bullshit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that happened. There was some political gathering that took place. There was, like, a prime minister... Guzot was his last name. He had, like, a long French name that I'm not gonna try to pronounce. But Guzot, he was, like, one of the first ones that they were attempting to protest and get removed before, like, all of the entire revolution kind of broke out. After he did resign, because things were tensions were getting high, there was, like, a situation where large group had gathered outside of the prime minister's house, and there was, the military was there, and, like, it's said that there was, like, an accidental musket firing that took place from the military, but one person fired, and then they all fired, and 52 people were killed, and that kind of, like, was one of the many things that, like, kind of sparked it, because it was, like, already a powder keg of, like, oppression, but...
Totally.
But that was one of the things that really got people upset, because whenever like in like most revolutions, whenever the military starts just like killing civilians, like
Yeah.
people don't take too kindly to that, especially if it's like their own military too, you know, like
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. There's probably someone out there that could do a really interesting like dissertation on like homeland military occupancy within like in like a insurrection movement, you
Right.
know? But
Yeah.
I'm sure someone actually has, but
True.
it seems like whenever the military starts fucking killing people, that's when people get real mad.
Understandably.
Exactly. But yeah, so all that kind of led up to the Revolution of 1848, and I know that after the Revolution of 1848, they had, or as I had kind of said before, it led to the French Second Republic, which I believe was underneath Napoleon III.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I had read that there. And that didn't really last that long.
Yeah. Well, literally, it was in June of 1848 that there was another, like, I don't know if it was necessarily like a full-blown revolution, but it was called the June Days Uprising.
Yes.
And this was to kind of overthrow the, what the hell did you just call it?
The French Second Republic.
Yes, the French Second Republic. Thank you. Yeah, it was basically to overthrow the Second Republic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because a lot of the things that I was reading was about like the February section of that. So it's like it was almost like two revolutions simultaneously because from what I've gathered, the government was kind of trying to avoid having like a full-on revolution.
Right. Yeah.
By like switching some things over.
Yeah. Which the 1848 revolution, the one that you talked about, because these both were in 1848, only a few months apart.
True.
They call that one the February Revolution, and this one they call the June Days Uprising. But yeah, this was created by French workers, led by French workers, and was, to kind of overthrow this newly established thing that was literally established like 6 months ago or whatever. And yeah, it at the end it basically sort of ended this more Republican type government and was a bit more like liberal. And in this uprising, so they called in the French National Guard. After this happened, over 10,000 people were killed or injured, and then they deported 4,000 revolutionaries to French Algeria. And yeah, but there was still a change in government after that, so yay.
Yeah.
Well done.
I mean, again, baby steps, a little bit of class consciousness here and there.
But yeah, I mean, just to put into perspective, like how often the French really love to just revolt. That was literally, this first one was February, second one happened in June.
Yeah.
Because they were like, not thrilled with the outcome of this.
Not too stoked on where this is going. Well, and what's interesting too, to kind of start into some of the art stuff that we're going to be talking about is, I know like in some of the articles I had read and some of the things that people had said was like the February Revolution was kind of more positive, more hopeful.
Yeah.
You saw a lot of like inspiring art, whereas like by the time June had rolled around, it was very like bleak as far as the art went. Yeah,
and I actually have a quote from our boy Karl Marx about both of these revolutions. He said, "The February Revolution was the beautiful revolution. The June Revolution is the ugly revolution, the repulsive revolution, because deeds have taken place of phrases."
Yeah. I know that also Frederick Engels attended some of the like February court, what did I call it? The French term, champagne de banquets, and had written some articles for like the French Revolution newspaper, like La Revolte or something like that. So, or Viva la Revolte. But so our boys,
love them. Always involved with revolutionary acts, aren't they?
Love that. But Yeah, so that was a lot of kind of the lead up to the revolution. I mean, pretty standard things to want to revolt over.
Yes.
You had done some on Académie des Beaux
Yes. Okay. So let me find, where did my notes go? Here it is. Yeah. So before this revolutions of 1848, and this French Academy kind of still exists and still existed after this, but it was just like people really, after these revolutions, they were like, nah. So there was something called the French Academy. There's like a fancy name for it, but I don't want to get into it. So basically this was the like official art deciders in France. They pretty much controlled like who was creating the art, what kind of art was being created, and they also owned like the majority of the art schools. So they would like get people into these art schools, and then in these art schools could control like the way that people were being trained and what types of things they were producing. Mostly before the 1848 revolutions, the style was romantic or historical. This style of painting was basically done. The historical paintings were, it's kind of funny that they're called historical because they like were, but they weren't. It was like a very rosy portrayal of like the battles that were fought by the French military.
Like propaganda history.
Completely, yeah, exactly. And so they were like, showed these like war heroes and how amazing the French military is and they're so great. And then they would depict like, you know, kind of the more bourgeoisie or the people who are in charge in like these amazing outfits and looking very regal and looking like
heroic,
smart and heroic, and important and everything. So this academy, basically, so they would set the standards of what the art was going to be at the time. They would select the group of artists that were going to produce this. And they basically would say what art was good, what art was bad, and what was dangerous. They claimed that they were protecting French culture from corruption by rejecting any students who were creating anything that was not like aggrandizing the people that they thought should be.
Yeah, like they had only permitted like the historical painters to get the highest levels of fame in the art community or whatever.
Exactly. And people could submit to this thing called salon, which was basically like the gallery of the time, like the big gallery, or not museum because it's not really old-timey stuff, but museum gallery type thing of the time where people would go to see all of this art. So
do museums have to just be old stuff? I don't know. I guess the term museum
that's
even
true.
means, you know. I don't know.
You might be right. I take it all back. I don't even know what a museum is. I've never even
never been to one.
And so if an artist applied to submit something to the salon, and if they were rejected, they would have to wait for a whole other year to try again. So there you go. So that's a little bit of background on this academy, which I will kind of talk about a little bit more when I talk about the artists that I'm going to talk about. Yeah. So there you go. So that is a good background for what was going on around the time that these artists that we're going to talk about were creating their works.
Yeah. Well, and one interesting thing too, I guess, to throw it in here really quick.
Yeah.
I know that, so from what I read, 4 years after the revolution in 1789 in France, there was like some shifting of power that took place within like the Academy of Arts.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it had become like disbanding, but then like the government took over parts of it. So like the government had a lot of control over the art between 1850 and 1830, from what I read here. And those paintings, or you know, the government had a big influence in why they were all like historical paintings that were highly censored. Like, they wouldn't allow any, like, revolutionary type paintings to be... Even if it was, like, a historical revolution, like, they wouldn't allow those to be produced or at least showcased.
Exactly, yeah.
For fear that they would cause another revolution.
Yeah, and these paintings would never show... Like, these historical paintings would never show, like, the bad parts of battle or war. It was always, like, heroic things. It was never, like... Hey, a shit ton of people died, and, like, the soldiers who had to fight in this,
those 12-year-old boys get fucking mowed down, dude.
And then, like, the people who lived in that region are, like, greatly struggling now. Like, none of that shit. It was always, like, the bourgeoisie is awesome, and...
Don't ever question it.
Do not question rich people ever.
We know what's best for you. We promise. Well, if we're going to jump into the art next, you want to take a quick ad break, and then we'll be right back with paintings.
Yes.
All right, we are back.
We are back, and we're going to talk about paintings.
Yeah, and I assume I'll put all of the paintings on the Twitter. I'm sure you'll put them on the Instagram.
Yep, we will post them on the Instagram. So yeah, this might want to... Wow, sentence structuring.
Words.
I don't even know. You may want to, like, follow along with our Instagram or our Twitter, like, while we're doing this episode, so you can look at these paintings while we're talking about them. Might be a neat little thing to do. So I will get that post up ASAP as soon as we get this episode published.
Exactly.
So I'm going to be talking about Jules Breton. He was born in... Quick thing, probably a lot of this pronunciation, I'm so sorry about it, just before we get into it. It's French, I'm not French, so, you know.
Don't speak French.
I'm going to try my best here.
So.
But, so he was born in Courrier, I'm going to guess is how you say that. And he met the painter Félix Devin in 1842. And Felix was the one who basically pushed him and pushed his family to let him study art. And he studied under, Jules Breton studied under Félix Devin. So he went to Ghent in 1843, and he studied at the Academy of Fine Arts. So that academy that we were talking about earlier, he did study there. So he studied under Félix Devin and also Hendrik van der Hart. So he was living close to where the revolutions happened in 1848. He kind of experienced a lot of things firsthand and saw, like, the devastation that this created, saw the horrors of war, basically, and, like, leading up to it, just how devastated the country was, people starving and being treated poorly and all of that. So his family was really struggling financially after his father had died, so he was forced to move back to his hometown. And because of that, he started painting these more rural scenes. He was inspired by, like, the daily work life of the peasants in his native region. And those are some of his paintings that he's most famous for. The painting I'm going to talk about the most is actually not really one of his most famous paintings, but it was one that was most closely tied to this revolution, or at least, like, portrayed the revolution more so. I don't know who this quote was from, but basically his portrayal of these peasants, it was, quote, "He gave the simple peasants a place previously reserved for the gods and the powerful." So he took his training that he got from the Academy of Fine Arts, and he used that style to paint the everyday person. And so it put this everyday person, this working class person, into the same sort of feeling that previous subject matter of paintings would have, like the heroic, style that we were talking about. He used the same, like, detailed, beautiful way that he knew how to paint, but to just give these everyday people more of a look into this is what everyday people are like in a really beautiful way.
Which hadn't really been done too much up to that point.
Yeah.
Because, again, like, having a painting of you kind of meant that you were, like, aristocratic, you were rich as fuck.
Exactly, yeah, because you could afford to have a painting done of you. It was commissioned.
Or you've done something that, like, someone would paint of you, right?
Right.
But, like, having just, like, paintings of regular-ass people was, like, kind of not common. Yeah,
it was genuinely, like, revolutionary that it would happen. And as we had said, like, this academy was not really, like, they would not allow paintings of everyday people. That just was not something that they allowed to be produced or shown off at all. So this was a completely new style of art. His painting that I feel is, like, the most telling of, like, the effects of this revolution is called La Faim, or The Hunger. It's super fucking depressing as hell. Seeing the devastation after the February Revolution and leading up to the February Revolution inspired him to paint this painting. It was done in 1850, and this painting, along with another one that he called Misery and Despair, were both destroyed. I couldn't find any pictures of Misery and Despair, so I guess that one was just completely destroyed. I also couldn't really find much information on why or how they were destroyed, so don't know if that was something that, like, the higher-ups tried to do, or if it was just, like, an accident thing. Don't know.
Or just old as shit.
Yeah, exactly. But, yeah, so both The Hunger and Misery and Despair, which you can probably assume what the subject matter of that was, they both were destroyed. So all the pictures that you'll find when you look up The Hunger is gonna be, I could only find in black and white, and it's like, it looks pretty worse for wear. It's all scratched up, and yeah. But so this painting depicts a father coming home from, like, a long day of work or battle, and he's empty-handed, no food for his family. They're living in a little bit of, like, a dilapidated house. The children look completely anguished. There is, I believe it's a little boy, it's, again, sort of hard to tell, but he's, like, literally almost ripping his hair out. He's so upset. The daughter is yelling. There's another daughter in the corner crying. And then the mother is on the ground, and she's either extremely ill or possibly dead. There's an infant child crawling on top of her, and she's lying there completely motionless. Her hand is sort of curled up in this weird position, and her head's lulled off to the side. She's kind of, eyes are open and glazed over, and she's not attending at all to her infant child that is literally, like, crawling on top of her. And she's laying on, it appears to be like a bed of straw, so clearly this is, like, a poor working class family, and they're starving, as Taylor had talked about a bit. Like, the food prices had gone up and people were starving. So yeah, again, the only photos I could find were in black and white, but it's dark. The only light source in this painting is coming through, like, a window on the right side, and it's just, like, illuminating the figures in this, and the rest of it is pretty dark, which became more common for this style of painting as this style was kind of being developed. It was, like, more dark colors, muted tones to show, like, the despair that was happening. So yeah, pretty fucking depressing painting.
Pretty sad. But I mean, and that's what was so, like, interesting about it too, is just, like, the reality of, like, the situation that they were having. Like, you know, it's kind of just reading about it, I guess, I was very perplexed. Because, I feel like in a lot of revolutions, we kind of hold them as, like, these amazing, like,
Right.
things that happen, and, like, there's revolution in the air, but, like, it's like, no, like, lots of fucking people die, and, like, people are starving.
Right.
And whether that was, like, even if that was a father coming back from, like, a battle, or even just, like, a day of work, it's like, this is, like, the reality of what is causing people to revolt.
Yes, exactly.
And that cannot be forgotten in, like, the sweep of, like, the revolutionary optimism,
Yeah, well, I think, and that speaks to, like, the Karl Marx quote where he was saying, like, the February Revolution was the beautiful revolution. It was like they were at a time where there's, like you said, there's revolution in the air, there's this excitement of, like, okay, we're gonna fix things, and then at the end of that revolution, the outcome was not really what they wanted it to be, which that happens in revolution. I mean, that's the risk that you take, is you're gonna be putting people through something horrible. I mean, lots of you are gonna die, lots of you are gonna struggle the entire time while you are conducting a revolution. It's not like things are all of a sudden better the second you start revolting. Like, shit still sucks for a long time. And, yeah, like, so at the time with the February Revolution, people were in these greater spirits, and then when things didn't really go the way that they had wanted them to, and then the June Revolution happened, it's like, well, fuck, now we have to fucking do this again. And I mean, I think that's something that, like, in American history we can definitely relate to.
Yeah, and especially if you're, like, once... It's one thing to be like, yeah, we're gonna do this, we're gonna revolt, we're gonna, like, have these demands, blah, 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 and then it's another thing to, like, be there and doing it, and it's like, oh, like, the military is trying to murder us now. Like,
yeah, and the people that are holding the power are strong and
have a lot of resources.
Yeah, they are in control of most everything that you need to be alive. So,
yeah.
It's like, it's not an easy task. You can't just, as much as the French did love to revolt, like, you can't just expect the outcome to be what you want it to be. You're going up against some intense fucking forces, And
I mean, the fact that the French had to revolt that many times, I think, is telling of how it doesn't always end how you want it to,
Exactly. I mean, there was this one in February, and then literally June after that, it's like, here we go again.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So this painting, The Hunger, represented the struggle that followed the revolution and the struggle that sparked the revolution. It showed the truth of the struggles of the proletariat. Like we had said, this kind of subject matter was not common and really was not allowed to be produced until this revolution and this movement in art. And this style depicting the true struggles of the working class rather than this glorified battles, scenes of battles that, like, rosied up this narrative, making the war to be something heroic rather than gruesome, and never depicting the true aftermath of battles, and never depicting, like, the true struggle of the working people. So this new style of art that showed the everyday people, the struggles, their celebrations, their daily lives, this movement became known as realism. Realism, how you may know the term realism now, it's sort of shifted a bit as, like, Impressionism came in, and now there's what you may associate it with is called, you might be thinking of photorealism, and that's where, like, that's the technique of painting something as true to an image as you possibly can. Like, you'll look at it and be like, holy shit, is that a photograph? At this time, realism meant you're portraying real situations. They wanted to show the life of the contemporary people. They wanted to show the truth of, like, the not so great parts of life, the daily work that people had to do, the struggle, the hunger. They were, simply by creating these paintings and not giving a shit what the Academy had to say, this art style in and of itself was a revolution. It was showing the peasant people on a canvas, which had never been done before, and that gave them a little bit of power, honestly. I mean, how we talk about representation mattering. It's showing that you as a person can be shown on what at that time was like the TV sort of thing. Like, this is what you're seeing to show people's lives, and you're finally seeing yourself on there as the working person.
That's true. One thing I think that's interesting too is like, you know, something that we see like in our culture as well as like the Academy that we were talking about. You know, they were just not accepting anything other than like historical art. But that doesn't mean that people weren't painting realist art, you know, up before the revolution and things like that. But I think that it's very interesting that it wasn't like illegal to paint realist type. It wasn't illegal to paint realist type paintings, but you know, those were they just weren't like going to be showcased. You know, it's like now, like we can make revolutionary art. We can make like leftist art and things. You know, I make a lot of leftist kind of music, but it's definitely not what is like pushed in the mainstream.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, these days, obviously, we have more reach because we can kind of control our own spread of art with, like, social media and all of that. But, like, in this day, you would go to the salon to see paintings, and it was being chosen by the Academy what those paintings were going to be. Yeah. So realism would show people of all classes in all daily situations, and reflected the changes that were brought about by the industrial and commercial revolutions. Yeah, people wanted to represent their own selves. In realism, you'll often see, like, muted tones, kind of earth color palettes, a little bit of a darker, like, background and everything. This movement was pretty controversial because it was criticizing the upper class and examining, like, what they were doing and the things that the upper class was pushing. Realism is also looked at as like the spark of the modern art movement, and that was the like incorporation of modern life and art being put together. Another painting of Jules Breton's is this Song of the Lark. He painted in 1884. So this was after he had returned back home and was seeing that life of, like, the working peasant person. I love this painting. I think it's gorgeous, and it's had some, like, talk about it, so it's worth talking about. So it is a younger-looking peasant woman. She's holding a hand sickle. She's barefoot. She's standing in this field. Her clothes are dull, cheap-looking. She holds this sack on the front of her that will likely be filled with wheat or something. She's standing out in this field as the sun is rising, so she's just about to start her long work day. You know, she's about to be wandering through this field barefoot, cutting wheat up. There's a farmhouse out in the distance. That's presumably where she lives. And yeah, the sun is like red in the sky. The sky is just starting to get some color into it. The most colorful parts in this painting is the grass in the distance behind her, and then this red sun. The rest are these really muted, dull colors, including the woman, the subject herself. Like, she's not even really, it's almost like she's not even in focus, honestly. Like, the sun is really more what I would say is in focus. Like, she's front and center, but she's almost blending in color-wise with the background. And it's peaceful. I mean, it looks like she's taking a breath right before starting her long day. It's called Song of the Lark, and so the assumption is that she's, like, staring off into the distance, hearing this lark's song. That's signifying the morning time, and she's just about to start her day. So she's, like, taking this moment, listening to the nature, hearing this cry of the lark that is, you know, they wake up in the morning, they cry, and that's her, like, signal to, okay, it's time to go to work. This painting it's definitely like gathered some fame. Bill Murray actually, this is like his favorite painting. And he said that at a low point in his life when he was like in Hollywood looking for work and struggling, he saw this painting and he says that it saved him.
Wow.
And he says, quote, "Well, there's a girl who doesn't have a whole lot of prospects, but the sun's coming up anyway, and she's got another chance at it. So I think that gave me some sort of feeling that I, too, am a person, and I get another chance every day the sun comes up."
Very profound, Bill Murray.
Yeah, right? Like, fuck. Jules Breton was actually pretty successful while he was alive. He could spend months creating just one work, which, like, at the time for struggling artists, that was, like, unheard of. You had to be producing, like, daily works. And Vincent van Gogh was around at the time that he was. And you can kind of, like, compare and contrast those two, because, as a lot of us know, Vincent van Gogh didn't get famous until after he had died. Vincent van Gogh was so poor that he had to walk 85 kilometers to where Jules Breton was living, and he wanted to study under him, but Breton at the time was charging, like, quite a bit to study under him, and so Vincent van Gogh was like, nah, actually.
Nah, can't do that, cheap, sorry.
It was... Sorry, I just lost my place. Okay, right. Vincent van Gogh actually saw Song of the Lark, and he said it was fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not quite as raving of a review as Bill Murray.
Yeah, exactly. Another painting of his that I just love. This one's pretty similar to Song of the Lark in subject matter, at least, and in, like, the color scheme and all of that. This one's called End of the Working Day, or Fin du Travail, I think it's pronounced. This one was painted in 1886 to 1887. This is another painting showing farm workers out in a field. In this one, the sun is setting, so I just liked kind of the juxtaposition of this woman starting her day and then these workers ending their day. They're out in a field. There is one woman on the left. Again, they're all in these muted clothes, cheap-looking clothes. She's carrying a huge sack on her head. She looks exhausted. There's a woman with shovels in her hand. She's staring off into the distance. And then another woman to her left carrying a sack on her head. And then a man off in the distance, and he's, like, using some sort of machinery to cut this field. They all look tired, forlorn, and Song of the Lark, I think, almost has this more sort of hopeful feel to it. She's staring up, out off into the distance with this look of, like, okay, here we go. These people are staring down and looking pretty downtrodden. And yeah, muted tones. Again, these people, while they are clearly the subject of the painting, they're not standing out too much. Like, their clothing is kind of matching the background colors. They're dusty looking. They are one with the work that they are doing. And just one last little tidbit about Jules Breton. So in 1886, while he was still alive, this guy Donald Smith bid $45,000 for one of Breton's paintings called The Communicants. In 1886, $45,000. So these days that would have been $1.227 million.
Jeez.
Yeah. Like an unreal amount of money. And that price was the second highest paid price for a painting by a living artist at that time.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry. I kind of said something wrong. So, in 2016, this painting was sold again, and that's when it was sold for $1.27 million. But it was said that the $45,000 that was paid in 1886 with inflation, that's a very similar figure.
Okay,
so it was basically sold for that same amount, which is, it's just crazy. I mean, it's held its value pretty well. And this painting is of, like, I think it's a religious ceremony, it appears. This one's a little bit brighter in color than his other ones. It shows, like, a procession of people dressed in these long white robes, holding swords, followed by these two younger looking boys holding swords, passing through in this little village. You can see a church off in the distance. There's this older man sitting on a chair, kind of reaching out to one of the, girls that was in this procession, and then there's like an older peasant woman talking to her. Anyway, so that's the painting. Honestly, of all of his works, I'm like, meh. I love the End of the Working Day and Song of the Lark way more. I think they're much more beautiful. This one to me is honestly like kind of boring. I'm like,
mid.
Yeah, it's mid, if you will. So it's like, it's fine to me. But again, these kind of things weren't really painted. So there you go. That is Jules Breton. If you look up his work, you will see a lot of this, like, farm peasant life, working people in the midst of their work, like, actively doing work.
Seems like it would have to have been kind of inspired by the, like, what he experienced for the revolution, you know?
Right, yeah. And
just the working classes kind of woes and how they interact every day, and, you know, what their day-to-day lives are.
Exactly, yeah. And just wanting to give those people, like, a place in art, basically.
A voice, if you will.
Exactly, yeah. So there you go. That's Jules Breton. Give him a Google if you want.
Similarly, I didn't do as much research into a specific artist, but the one piece I wanted to bring up here, it was titled Souvenir of the Civil War by Jean-Louis Ernest Meissonier. Again, apologize about the pronunciation. But it's this, like, really interesting work of art that takes place on, like, a city street in France, I believe in Paris, where the revolution was going on. It was after a battle of a barricade. So, you know, if they were barricading one place or another that was, you know, in the revolution, whether it was like a place that was holding food or, you know, some place of the aristocrats were residing, there would be these battles that kind of took place there.
Think Les Mis, that scene where
Yeah.
The little boy gets shot, and they've got, like, all of this shit piled up in the street to block it off, basically.
Exactly. But it's just kind of, like, very evocative, I feel. There's, like, bodies lying on the ground. There's blood that's spilling. The way that it's kind of positioned, you can kind of see down the street, and it seems that there's, like, you know, other people, other bodies that are there, although they're kind of mainly piled up at the barricade. It seems like it's a little bit brighter than some of, like, what the paintings you were speaking about, but it's still very just, like, dreary looking. Muted
tones, earth tones.
Exactly, yeah. And just, like, the horror and grief that was on display. They, in the article I was reading, they compare it to Delacroix's painting that had been painted or in 1830 for, like, a different revolution that was called Liberty on the Barricades, which again was more historical. It was, like, revolutionary, but it was, like, more positive, I guess.
Right.
Whereas this was very, like, bleak and just, like, looking at the destruction of the, or, you know, and just, like, the human cost of, like, an actual revolution and a civil war, basically.
Totally, yeah.
There was another one that was worth mentioning. This one is difficult to pronounce. It's Patril de Nut Fevrier. It was also painted in 1848. It has a family kind of coming back, I believe, to their house, and just there's, like, a bunch of rubble that's, like, kind of scattered around them. They're on, like, horses in a carriage, and it's much more darker, kind of the same style as
like the lighting is dark.
The lighting is very dark. I guess I can show you too, and it's not anything too crazy other than it just is showing like the darkness and the rubble and kind of the destruction that was happening all around.
Right,
at the time.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, it shows like the actual like what the city itself went through. These buildings have been knocked down and there's crap in the streets.
And that was by Adolphe Lelux. Again, so sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine.
We're fine, but yeah, so it just like those two pieces of art I was very interested in kind of like seeing just again like the actual bloody cost of having to do a revolution and go through like what's basically a civil war and being like an insurrectionist group. Kind of the same as like the first one you talked about, the hunger one, like the actual cost of like what people are going through. And I just think that it's important to remember that, like when you are revolting, like people give their lives for that kind of stuff.
Exactly, yeah. Like no matter what your convictions are with this revolution, as strongly you feel about them and as inspiring as they can be, like at the end of the day you have to know people are going to die. This is going to be grim, it's going to be gruesome, and the aftermath itself, even if it's successful, is going to be bleak. It's going to be rough. Like you have so many people have died, and then that setting up now of your next government or whatever it may be is like it's going to be a struggle, and you don't have your resources yet, and you don't have the things that you need yet. Like, food is still scarce, all of these things. So it's going to be a while before the fruits of your labor come, basically. Which I think, like, is something that's important for all of us to think about, like, us who would be the people to participate in a revolution. Like, there are times, and I feel this too, where it's like you get caught up in almost like the war aspect of revolutions, of just like, I want to show these people, I want to make them feel the way they've made me feel, I want to destroy these people. Yeah, totally. But it's also like important to look at paintings like this and look at work like this and remember that like it's not going to be all like battles and glory, and then at the end of the day it's like, cool, we defeated the bourgeoisie and now everything's great. Like, no. You have to look at the realities of things, that even if it is worth fighting for, it's gonna be fucking bleak.
Difficult.
Oh,
for sure. And I don't know that there's like an overall message other than just, remember that like it's hard, and that's why we're here to support each other too. Exactly. How difficult things are, like the first painting, the hunger you were talking about, like people are fucking hungry. If we can even do something small and band together to feed other people, that's at least a step towards a better society. So.
Well, and looking at paintings like the hunger, seeing that, relating it to today's situations, it's like, you have the works that Taylor was talking about that show the reality of like what civil war looks like, but then you can look at the hunger and go, okay, well, this is why we're doing this. This is why it's worth it. You look at the other paintings by Jules Breton of the peasant people having to toil their lives away, and it's like, this is why we do this. It's to give people a fair chance.
Absolutely.
So,
but I mean that's all I have. Do you have any last thoughts?
Great. Not really, just so stay tuned for our next installment of this Art of the Revolution, and we'll be talking about all kinds of different styles of art, all different kinds of revolutions. We're stoked about it.
I'm excited. It's gonna be good to do a little bit more, like, not necessarily, I mean, it can be grim for sure, as we've just seen, but Also some more like uplifting, positive ones too.
Yeah,
so.
it's funny because when we were talking about this series, we were like, "Oh, it'll be a little bit of a more lighthearted thing," and then you're like, "I want to do this painting of dead bodies in the street." I was like, "I want to do this painting of a starving family with a dead mom."
Yeah, we're really fun at parties.
Yeah. But
pluggables, dude.
Let's
plug that shit in.
Plug that shit. So follow our Instagram, especially since this is more of a visual series. You will want to definitely look at what we're talking about, so you can, from our great descriptions, you can get a little bit more of an actual view of what's going on here. And that is at Remarks Podcast at Instagram, and of course that's Remarks spelled like Karl Marx with an X.
And then I believe it's at Remarks Pod on Twitter. REMARXPOD, and I'll post all the paintings there as well if you want to look at them. But do both. Look at them twice.
Like both of the posts.
Yes,
follow
please.
both of the social media accounts, guys. JK, but not really. Yeah, and then shoot us a comment. Let us know what you think of these paintings. Let us know what your favorite ones are. Do they make you really sad? Yeah.
Let us know too. I was thinking about this. Let us know if anybody of any of our 20 people that listen to the show, if there is anything that you would like to hear more about.
Yes.
Or if there's like a specific art movement y'all like that you want to suggest,
you want us to talk about.
Let us know any of that. Just let us know things.
Talk to us. Speak to us.
Yeah.
We want to hear from the people.
Exactly. You're the listeners. We're just the conduits of your will.
Exactly. You were speaking through us as the Lord speaks through. Just kidding.
The burning bush. Something like that.
An anti-religion podcast. Anyway, yeah, and be sure to check out Taylor's YouTube channel, The Lefty Agenda. He just posted one about what is it? MGTOW, that's right.
Yeah.
And then, aren't you doing a new one pretty soon?
Yeah, I actually have a new one that I'm almost done with. I just have to, record the script and stuff. But It's on rainbow capitalism.
Oh, fuck, yeah.
A little delayed from Pride Month, but,
I mean,
things take time.
Yeah, and now you can be, settled down from that, and then this will reignite your fire about how much you hate rainbow capitalism.
It's true. But yeah, it should be good. It's also kind of just woke capitalism in general, or woke advertising.
Right.
It mostly focuses on rainbow advertising, but there's also the shit that happened with Nike and Colin Kaepernick and all that. So it goes into all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, every single fucking big corporation, as soon as the Black Lives Matter movement has been around for a long time, but obviously last summer there was a huge boom with it. Every huge corporation was fuck, we gotta pretend we care about people now, and released a statement about that.
And all the fucking letters of
oh my god,
that were released and posted on
we're
social media.
trying to do better.
Or we support the people in our community, this and this, and it's okay. And then there was some that were just no,
yeah, they just didn't say a
weird
single
all
thing.
lives matter shit that someone posted.
Yep.
I remember in Utah we have Vertical Diners, a vegan place, and they posted a big all lives matter thing. And we were all oh no,
there goes another vegan restaurant.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, I think that's it.
Great. All right. Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.